Don't get up.
You gotta seat the table there, Tony.
What's that?
I've seen the table.
Sit at the table.
Yeah.
Way back. No, that's what happened, you overworked. At my age.
All right, I call this meeting to order of the ad hoc construction committee on this 6th day of September at 11:08 a.m. Has everyone had a chance to review minutes from the last meeting? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion is made and seconded to approve the minutes. Is there any further discussion? All in favor to approve the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, moving right along then. First order at the, an update from Ben Chart Samuels.
So from our last, meeting, we went back, we've, produced a number of options that we wanna go through today. We'll be looking at a few of the options to price out, so we will hopefully a decision on a couple of these options to look at. But I'd like to go through each option and explain each one. As we go through them, from what you've seen in our previous meeting, we've made some minor modifications, and we'll kind of go through those on those options. So option one is your first page, kind of going through that. One thing to note, you'll see there's we indicated a new front entry off the north building. We were looking at if this is the option, we would do it at the south front. We have parking to the south, makes more sense. The Anderson building, complex is off of that, so we would relocate that. So looking, excuse me. This option is actually a 3-story option.
This is number one.
This is number one. So you'll see intake, just support, et cetera, is all on that first floor. And then the next 2 floors are the housing. So we're going through that. We did list some of the pros and cons of each one. This is keeping Minor Street open, but as you see, it is encompassing some of 4th Street. So 4th Street on this option would be closed off. It does remain on the site.
I have a question regarding that, not to interrupt you, but how are the people gonna access their homes in the
That would be a concern.
Okay.
One of the options met with the city, previously, if any of the streets were located to be, allocated to be closed, 4th Street was one of the options that they looked at, so that's why we incorporated that. These snippets, we previously were doing a working off the program, we sort of conveyed, a floor plan, so we've taken that floor plan and taking pieces of each one of those adjacencies, and then putting in those locations, so these are the program spaces that we went through that would be required, and then placing those on the site. Obviously, some of the cons on this one is closing 4th Street. A couple other things that we'd have to look at, and we go to, so the second page is the housing unit.
Corey, if I could interrupt
Sure,
a little bit.
go ahead.
Talking about this being multiple floor, that's gonna increase your staffing because you have to have the staff on the floor. So it almost,
Is it multiple floors due to the fact that the cell for each,
well,
cell
because
for each floor is
the first floor would be all the intake and the booking and all that.
Yeah.
And then the second floor would be your housing, and the third floor is the second tier of the housing, it's not actually.
But there's one pod basically then, or one
Yeah.
central unit that covers both the housing floors? Correct.
No, the first floor would have the booking station, that would be
Go ahead.
there, and then the housing would have the center pod for the pod.
For the second and third floors?
Yeah.
So it'd still be just 3 people.
No, because you have to have male and female on each floor. And we wouldn't have that.
So where inmates are present, you're gonna have to have opposite gender staff available, and if you're gonna have booking, where inmates could be housed in the receiving cells, you're gonna have staff down there. And then you're gonna have to have your elevator to go up to the second floor where you're gonna have your master control housing area. And then that person, the master control and the staff up there would observe both floors of that.
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, so you can see, if I'm on the floor there, you can see the floors from being on that ground level there, but because below you, on the bottom floor is booking and stuff like that, you're gonna have staff down there because inmates are gonna be in the receiving cells. And down in laundry and
And that's
kitchen.
why we've always tried to keep it to one level. Not increase our staff.
So also looking at using this, with this option, there's no demo of the existing buildings. Putting in that, utilizing that, front entry parking spot area on the lot. Second floor is the first floor housing. And then if you go to the next page, is the third floor, another housing unit, we need connections to the courts. And a couple of things what you're looking at is we have to have a secure corridor from the housing into the existing, court holding. That way you can access both courtrooms from the court holding. So a couple of things with this as well is you got the, going over the existing building, approaching on some of the other space. One of the main things is relocating that radio tower, which is an additional cost as well. And then, as George kind of pointed out on here with the guide wires that we would need, that where we located right now, we're just saying it's gotta be relocated. That would not be a location of where we could put that. You'd have to look at alternatives.
This is not the location?
It would, right now, there would not be a location, we're just saying it's gotta be relocated.
Oh, okay.
Existing one. Where we would have to go, we need enough space to get that to work out.
Okay. So is, with this option, option number 1, is it the same number of cells then?
Correct.
Okay.
So we're still at 58 plus doubles.
So, yeah, we're at, right now, with that location for the housing unit, we're at 88 beds. There's 58 cells.
Okay. So basically,
Or
40 be the same as if it was a cross minor.
Correct. So the programming spaces are identical to what we would be if we were across. 88 beds. Any questions on option one? And we can always go back.
Yeah, let's go on down.
So option 2, looking at keeping that, everything remaining on one floor. Taking that footprint, seeing how it's gonna lay out. One thing to note is taking down a couple of existing buildings, maintenance areas, for the loading dock. Trying to get that fit, again, this is, to the same program as what we outlined before, with a reduction in scope as well. You can see how much it's gonna take up Fourth Street, and again, it's approaching on those, the elderly housing units over on, across from Fourth Street. We are also having a reduction, trying to get this to work with the Sally Port, off on the north side. That's also, but that is reduced to get that basically in the footprint. You can see the encompassing of that footprint. You go to the second floor of the housing unit, again, we still have that, trying to get inmates to the courtrooms. Looking at a couple of different options on how to do that. If we eliminate that secure corridor that we're showing, and going in, we have some, quite a bit of remodeling to do in the courthouse to get that to work. Getting relocating the tower is also costly, and trying to avoid that, obviously, that we wanna do that, but then we're putting money into remodeling of the court. You'll see how much we also even, that's programmed the same way, and how that would housing unit to get that to fit into the property, and you still probably have no setback issue. Any questions on option two? Option three. Trying to keep this onto the existing site. You'll see you're, demoing mainly that south portion of the existing building to get that encompassed and did. You'll notice you need a new front entry, so right now we're located off the north building. Getting this laid out, you can see we still have potentially some setbacks. Also, we need this secure corridor. We'd be looking at a reduction in beds. We're looking at, reduction of 20 to 30 beds.
Which is it?
That's where we'd have to work out yet further. So right now, we're looking at 30 bed reduction. So that now you're from 88 to 30 to 50.
Max.
Correct.
Your current capacity of your jail right now.
Yep. There's only been 6 months. And this is a single story, or a single?
So it's basically the single story with the 2-story house.
So there is 2 stories.
For the housing unit, correct.
Alright, so you didn't show that. So, but there is a second. There should be another drawing that shows the second floor.
When I think it's worked with the position of that building. The height of that housing unit would be roughly about the height that this building and the center courts building would be. So even though those are 3 stories, the way that the floor heights work in that housing pod would be roughly about this. To just give you some context with that.
Any questions on the
So, excuse me. On number 3, suppose, that you, where you have on this first level, what are these, like, what, the offices here?
You got the intake, so you would have a fewer entry, visitation, non-contact visitation. You have off this long piece here, here's the Sally port, so you come into that pre-booking, and then you go into the booking, so you will see themselves.
So, I mean, there'd be no way to extend this subdivision farther east? Not without,
You'd be getting into 4th Street and the setbacks, again, is another issue,
what about on the second level? Would it be possible
You would
to
be-
extend that farther
on the
east?
second level
To
only.
add additional level? To add
You wouldn't have the sight lines to accommodate off the offset station if you push it further back. Because your floor levels would be offset. And then on this also option to note that the way this laid out, you'd have receiving, just off that north side. So all the parking here, we might be able to salvage some of the stalls in there, but a lot of that. Cause we need the loading docks on that north side. Currently it's located on that northeast corner.
Is there a way to slide this part of it up and possibly some of that over them? So this could be extended over to increase?
You wrapping it around,
Yeah.
we can, we got an option like that.
Okay. That's not infringing on the streets?
And I would we still may be getting close to that.
Okay.
Option 4. Roof front entry on the south building. We're taking away a couple of those buildings on the south side as well as the north side. Kind of getting that wrapped around. And this is programming, what we currently have. So we have the same amount of cells working in that, and you have, let's see, you have Sally Port off that north side, goes in pre-booking, and then into booking. Once again, we have kitchen laundry receiving, right now it's kind of located at, still at northeast corner of Fourth Street. Working that around, and we still have, working on that secure quarter. Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't have any parking off that north side.
Okay, so here again, just curious, suppose this and this were flip-flop. This would be right next to the building here. And what was this right here?
That's the intake, that's vehicle Sally Port, pre-booking board.
So this moved up here, and that moved down here.
You're separating those adjacencies so you could do something. If you book someone in, you have a, call it a path running, getting from pre-booking to booking into the house. And that's what the setback.
So in an effort to keep that three-person design, right, we wanna make sure that those support positions, you know, the booking, medical, all that stuff, is gonna be as close to housing as possible, so then that way we have as little enablement as possible, and staff aren't having to go way on the other side over there to help run back to help support other stuff. So we wanna keep that stuff as efficient as possible. I think too, if we move this up, then we really kinda, we screw around with the idea of courts and everything.
I think if you get through all the options, you guys have moved the housing in different locations, that might help open up some.
What is the size of this? Just the housing there,
Housing is about 19,000 square feet.
what's the dimensions?
20-something by 160,
Yeah.
something like that.
Was that,
I think it's,
this unit right here?
yeah, it's like 125 by 160, I believe. I don't have the exact number. Is it on some of these? Go to option 5. Just kind of moving things around, housing's still the same location as option 4, but readjusting, all adjust support, et cetera, booking, pre-booking vehicle Sally Port. We'd have to look at the different configuration to the vehicle Sally Port to get that to work, properly, but those locations are pretty much with this option. As you see, we're still tearing down a couple of buildings on the south side, and then that north building would have also go away. The front entrance on the south building. And then we're still closing down Fourth Street.
So when we see this, is it correct that when we see this secure corridor that goes east and west, that is on all these examples is a skywalk?
It's not necessarily a skywalk, it's built on top of the existing buildings.
So, I'm just curious if this would possibly work. So you move this up to here, will this fit in this space without, without,
That would, getting back to that, if we took the housing and put it to the north side,
yeah,
we're locating that further and further away from all the other things that need to be adjacent.
okay, so, that being said, suppose then that this area right here was basically vacated, and those offices would be moved, possibly to like a different addition over here, and all of this could go right here.
Similar to what we have on
Um, Well, no, well,
but bringing, kind of mirroring that, is what you're trying to do. So how, you're saying housing up here, this stuff would be down here.
correct, and then the offices that exist here now could be possibly go here.
We start to encroach again with getting onto minor, like if we have similar with that.
Well, this is minor here, right?
Correct. But if you're taking the jail support, vehicle salary port, all of that, would get into minor.
I see what you're saying.
Option 6, we relocated the housing. Here we're trying to eliminate that secure corridor on the outside of the building. With this option, you're coming through basically where the judges are, we have to mirror the large courtroom to get that to work. But then this was also isolating, the second courtroom, getting inmates to it. Maybe that's an option of just only, whenever you have inmates addressing it, it would be into the courtroom. But that's wrapping this around, we can get this to work, so we're only taking down like the maintenance building was, I think it's emergency management, into those areas. Housing union, but with this option, again, is kind of one of, a couple of things that you mentioned, we're starting to split up the adjacencies. You have the vehicle sally port, pre-booking, booking areas, all of those functions are on the north side. And then we have some of the support as far as the receiving, kitchen, administration, and laundry, all on the south side. We have to bring, you'll see on the right, the far right side, we have to have a corridor to get around to the housing, all the way around, so we split those, bring, and increasing that gap as well.
I don't know how anybody else feels about, personally, I would not like to see the streets blocked or taken away, if that's at all possible. So I think option 3 would be the closest to what I would be comfortable with. I don't know how anybody else feels.
So, we have some departments that we have to relocate.
Yep.
And so, we're really, what do we do with them? And building that out.
And then, like you said, is there a way to reduce will it be I suppose you call it the width,
We have to take a look at reducing the width.
just slightly, so that,
We would have to need a variance for that setback on that south side.
yeah.
And then take a look and see how many housing, how many beds we're actually gonna lose with this layout. And then still getting access to the courtrooms. We do have a reduction, to get this to work, reduction to the program.
A reduction in beds?
Reduction in beds as well as vehicle sally port, and potentially some other little functions to get that.
I guess what I would like to see if the committee could take action to select a couple of these options that Venture has created for the east solution. Because what I would propose is that we would then take these options and price out each one of them. Because each one of them has different elements that are tied to what's gonna impact the overall cost. Option 3, we've obviously got demolition costs that we wouldn't have had in our south connection. There's relocation of staff, where are we putting them during construction, all those sorts of things. It'd be good to tabulate that for each one of them. So if option 3 is one you'd like to have priced with some tweaks, I'd also like to see you pick one more. And then what I would propose is that come back, in about a month here with some updated numbers, because the meeting that we had with the city, last month was really about process to be able to approach them about possible vacation of the street. And the summary of the response that we got from them was a letter from the county, signed by the county board chair, identifying the request of a possible vacation with supportive information in regards to why that request would be made. And that documentation would come from us determining the different options that have been explored, the costs associated with them, not only first costs, capital costs, but operational costs, and impact to what it does to the surrounding neighborhood and community. So, if 3 is one of them, I would also, I'd like to see you pick one more, so that way we can get 3 options that we're working on pricing for you.
I have a really hard time picking this. This should have been sent to us 2 weeks ago with some indication of what some of these rooms are.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have time to do this right now. You know, I'm guessing, and I don't like guessing.
So, do you want a couple of weeks to look at this and then we?
And I would like to see what all these rooms are. I mean, you're going through it, and I'm trying to write them in as fast as I can. I just gave up. And is the Skyway a dead issue?
No, it's not. The Skyway is something that, that's about the county wants to go with, that's something you can certainly look at. Just keep in mind that the Skyway is an extension of the jail, so therefore everything with it has to be detention. So.
So is the secure walkway. So is this here, in this new hall we're building here.
Correct, but this is in the interior of the secure perimeter, where the secure walkway is on the exterior, therefore it needs to be all detention as well.
Yeah.
So that span, keep in mind, is best guess at 100 feet, right? Let's say it's 100 feet of detention, walls, doors, frames, cameras, and it's used for one purpose only, is to take people to and from court. Now I can't tell you how frequently that's gonna get utilized, that's something that you guys would have to take in depth look at. But, you know, it's something the county needs to consider, that additional cost to that one look. Now, if the county wants to go that route, sure, they can certainly draw it up and design it to meet those standards. But the other thing that needs to be considered too is that it's gonna need to meet the specs and inspections and the maintenance as a bridge.
Yeah.
That's something that the county needs to consider as well. But it is not a dead issue, as far as my office is concerned, if that's
Okay.
something you guys wanted to go, feel free. You know,
What's gonna happen with the old, consider it's marked out as the old jail, that 3-story structure we're sitting in right now.
So currently, on the south option that we talked about last time, prior to exploring these additional options, a portion of that jail is going to be utilized as the connecting corridor that Brett just referenced. You come out of housing to court holding, so some of those holding cells are going to be, some of those current cells are gonna be used as holding cells for the jail. That's why that south option was minimal renovation to keep the cost down, so we're only building and spending money on jail. When we start to look at these other elements, we're gonna have to look at renovation. So in option 3, there's a potential that the old jail would have to be revisited for square footage for the displaced members that we're gonna tear down that 1995-96 edition. So that's what,
What are you referring to?
so in this option 3, if you look at where this housing would go, if we select option 3, there's people that currently,
I don't think that's a real consideration at this point. Like personally, I think we can accommodate that, off-site.
okay, so to answer your question, currently right now, in each one of these options, there is renovation that needs to happen.
I understand that.
There may be renovation in the jail. That scope hasn't been determined on each one of these options as of yet. The south option has been determined that a portion of it will be reused.
Well, it strikes me if we would explore option 3 and use portion, but I don't see why the current Sally Port can't work
Sally Port for what?
for the jail.
Keep that as a Sally Port?
Maybe have to do some upgrades in it, but why not? The structure's there.
The structure is there, but it's a safety and a security issue in regards to the space that's limited in that area to be able to get them to the housing unit that's there. So if you're talking about an expansion of it, that could be something that's considered.
There's room on the south, good.
I think what I would like some direction from this committee, and I do understand that you wanna look at detail. I want you to understand that what Venture has done is they've taken the program over here, and they basically fit this on the campus to give you a conceptual or a size element of the restraints that your campus currently provides us without getting into the streets. If one of these options is selected, there would be massaging of this floor plan to be able to give you a different flow. So is this a fine floor plan for these options? By no means the answer is no to that. So if we were to pick it apart and put the beams on there, I think it's an unfair representation of finalizing this, right? This was intended to identify how much space do we need to be able to provide the real estate needed for the program that was identified on the south option. And I can tell you that right now, out of the 6 options that are shown here, there is only one option that they propose on option 3 that doesn't creep into a street, and that does not meet the program space that was on the south option. They've cut space out of it to make it fit. So the exercise that they went through did identify that in order to meet the program requirements for your building, we do need to encroach on a street. If the direction from the committee is, we're not moving into the street, then the program needs to be reduced. And it needs to, the consideration needs to be, is that the choice for a master plan? Meaning, what are you going to do beyond this? And that was a point that I had with each one of these, is that if you do put all of this on one block, what is the next step in 20 years from now when the courthouse needs renovation or work there? All of that needs to be taken into consideration about what is that long range plan.
I guess I have another question. Regarding option 3, there is considerable space that was just basically kind of ignored here, it looks like. That could be, why could that be utilized?
Where could be the front entrance?
Huh? Oh, the front entrance? Well, it could be here.
But why can't the answer stay the same place it is now? I mean, the answers would come in here. Why can't that stay the same?
Yeah.
In each one of these options, each one of these options is closing off either the entrance on the south, the entrance to the east, cause they're wrapping around the
I
structure.
understand that, but what about the entrance to the west? That's going to be still intact?
This one here.
This entrance here, this is really an entrance into a secure part of your building, just walking into the sheriff's office. You don't want the public walking in.
So that
Well, the sheriff's office would probably be decorated, relocated once this is done.
No, it needs to be, it could be.
Sheriff's office remains where it's at right now. Right now, the game plan that we have, the sheriff's office stays right where it's at.
I wasn't aware of that because it wasn't very small.
I wanna emphasize, I guess I just wanna emphasize to all of you is that the budget that has been, I guess, identified prior to us starting this project is driving, we need to do minimal amount of work on this campus to be able to keep the costs down. And that means if we can minimize or reduce renovation, that's what we need to do. We need to figure out how much space do we need for the jail, how can we make it as most efficient as possible from a staffing perspective, from an operational perspective, safety and security, to keep the dollars down. The moment that we start diving into different renovation pieces, that's all gonna start to increase the cost. So, I understand that you weren't aware that the sheriff's office wasn't being touched, but the focus was the jail, that the sheriff's office was not being touched because cost was prohibiting that. And to kind of go along with that, the numbers that have been arrived for the bed count were driven by historical data that said that 52 beds with the limited classifications that you need, we need to come up with something that has more beds. That 88 number was a number that was not too high, it was not too low, it was a good median number that's gonna give you growth for the next 30 years. So we do need to consider that in these options, if we start to reduce that number, we're compromising the overall long-range plan, so how is your building gonna function?
The south option, we master plan for in the future, where eventually we're towards the government center. We, obviously, in picking an option, we'd like to do that as well, wrapping that new building around some of the existing. What do we do in the future? Of course, expand, or if we need more space in some of those areas. You mentioned the sheriff's office, the police department, what happens with those if we're starting to wrap that up?
I'm not sure court would need to, I mean, why would we need more than 2 courtrooms? Which we have now, correct?
I think that's a fair statement right now. But we do have to, when we put a master plan together, we're thinking about something for the next 50 years. You have to have a game plan, cause that building, that courthouse, 50 years from now, will need to be replaced. That happens. So in 50 years from now, cause this jail will still be standing here 50 years from now, what's the game plan for the courthouse? And not that you're making final decisions, but you're saying, there's real estate, there's a game plan, rather than we're only gonna take care of the need now. Do we take care of the need now, but also have a game plan for the future? And I have to tell you right now, with most counties that we work with, that's a process that it's eye-opening to them, because it's typically the approach to say, we're gonna save dollars, we're gonna address the need now. If you can do that same thing and plan for the future, that's your best option. Now, you guys may decide that you're gonna stay on this campus, and we're not gonna worry about it in the future. It's a decision you can fully make. But we coming in here, we feel it's our responsibility to explain to you that this right here doesn't give you the room for growth in the future.
Which I understand about the cell part of it, but I guess, why would we need more than two courtrooms in 50 years?
I'm not saying you'll need more than 2, your structure will have lived its life. You'll be talking about structure that's 100 years old. You'll be talking about structures that need replacement. We have to understand that they have a life expectancy, and we have to have a game plan for each one of them, of how are you then going to be able to move into the next one, because counties can't come in and build all of new at the same time. It's like right now, the perfect scenario for you would be find a place and build the justice center. Courts, jail together, have this be your general government offices. You can't afford it. Most counties can't take on that burden all at one time, so do it in pieces. Do it in steps with a game plan of how do you get to that long-range plan over the next 50 years, so that in 20 years from now, when this building is paid off, what's the next step, so that the county board that is then in place says, here was the vision of that board 20 years ago, and now we're gonna keep on with that roadmap. We're gonna keep moving that plan along. It's important information to consider. Not that you have to do it, but it's something that has been, a consideration on many of these large projects. It's a huge investment for the community.
Well, that being said, it almost sounds like maybe we'd be better off to look at building someplace else as jail.
You could.
That would have room to eventually, if our 100-year-old building deteriorates or whatever, that we could relocate that.
You could. I mean, that could definitely
So,
be.
and then what would be looking at as far as that is concerned, cost-wise?
Could definitely be something that we could give you an idea on a greenfield site.
I mean, if you feel that that's, if that's something that we need to consider, then I guess, to me, it wouldn't make sense to build something brand new around something that eventually is gonna be rotten in a few years, that we should look for.
Well, I do think we can definitely look at a greenfield site, but I don't want you to feel as though there isn't an option down here. There is. There is fully an option that could work. You own a block and a half right now. You own a city block and a half that you can look at a master plan on. We're talking about having a master plan on one city block. If a master plan is, we have a block and a half, let's look at the other half of the block. Or, master plan is, do you look at getting the other half of the block as a long-range plan? Not that you have to do it today, but that's a long-range plan to get there. There's nothing wrong with exploring that. exploring a greenfield site is absolutely something we can give you. We can give you the same building, greenfield site, give you a number. What that does to you operationally, you pick the distance of how far you wanna put it away from the courthouse, and now you've just added operational staff to that. We can run those numbers for you, absolutely, can definitely be a part of this solution. I just want you to have consideration for what each one of these does, cause there's so many moving parts on all of these options.
I know you wanna get more info on this.
Yeah.
If you want a couple of weeks to look at these drawings, by all means, we can give you a couple of weeks.
Can you also then, as Phil had asked, provide, like the names of all these different areas?
With,
Generally.
with the PDF and stuff, we send you a PDF, to Ashley. Would it helpful if we color code the areas and saying, you know, housing, booking, pre-booking, that, to that extent, instead of the room?
Yeah.
You get to this extent with the individual rooms, I think it's gonna be hard to do. But if we can color code that and get that.
And possibly some square footage figures for each area. Okay, that would be possible.
Okay, Huber is part of this now, no, I'm just guessing, but if you resume, Huber is part of this somewhere down.
The piece with Huber of how they have it programmed, just so we're clear on what it is, it's a Huber process that's not consuming a lot of square footage, so.
Yeah.
Historically, you would see these large, expanses of space so that you have your change order. They really narrowed it down to one lane rather than two lanes for me to kind of summarize that. So it's really space efficient is the game.
One of the things that we've seen with a lot of other counties is, a lot of it has been a result of COVID, coming out of COVID, and just the population, is that some counties have just completely gone away from Huber. Some counties still have a pretty vigorous, Huber program, and as Kurt was saying, a lot of times with, recent vintage, county jails, it'll be a large footprint Huber dormitory that is assigned for that. In this layout, it is, sort of a segregated entryway through the booking area, that's all that it is, and then those inmates would be going into the housing. So, what is involved with the design here allows for that operation to either happen, or if it does get pulled back, say 3 generations from now, or 2 generations from now, there's really now a huge loss of square footage in the plan. Because the ability is there to pick it up whenever that needs to.
I guess the question I would have, and I'm thinking schedule wise, it's kind of go over the overall, communications plan, just kind of remind everybody of the process is, we wanna pick one of these options, and once the option is picked, finalization, then there's details and tweaks that are gonna be done on finalizing the floor plan, the imagery from, a presentation perspective to the community would give some elevations and, a virtual exterior tour, fly around of what it's gonna look like wherever we decide to put it. All that needs to be done after we, get through your process of approving the location, the elements of the building, obviously any, coordination that we need to do with the city for approvals. So, what I'm getting at is that the timing of all of this, if we extend this duration, it's gonna keep pushing us a little bit later. And would a week be okay to come back and revisit after you've looked at it, or would you need a full 2 weeks? I'm just trying to find schedule wise. I have an issue with two Wednesdays from now, unless we find another day that week. I guess the other thing that we've done too, and so that we can deal with you one-on-one if there are specific questions, we have done virtual meetings, with board members to answer questions, so while you're going through them, we can jump online, answer questions specific to your floor plan, if you've got questions related to that, that may help during your review process, so I'll offer that as well.
I have a question
Like the 14th, whatever.
on this layout, option 2. It seems that the jail is, what you have shown here, dimension-wise, we could all fit on the main block. This was shifting down. That means demolishing this.
Yep.
We're already demolishing the corner anyway because the maintenance department's there. So we just extend.
Yeah, that's essentially what option 3 is, so if you flip the page, they actually took and shifted this right down here. One more.
I'm talking without all the other.
There you go. They shifted that, this housing right here, that's that housing that you just said was sitting in the option you just looked, they shifted it right here.
And then why is it so much smaller?
Because in order to fit this space in here, to be able to get this support in here, this design was intended to keep it without getting into the street. So this had to be reduced.
Why is it narrower? That's what my
What's
question.
showing is the corridors back in here, so it's not necessarily alert you to see this overlap onto it, so we can shift it.
If the secure corridor is eating up part of this,
Exactly, that's where we have a reduction in the program as well as the relax.
but you have to have that secure corridor, I'm just asking a question, can't you have the,
Yeah, we would,
secure elevator from the jail directly to the third floor?
yeah, that's an element that we would explore there, yep. We would
Which would allow us to keep this
potential.
full design.
Yeah, I don't know that.
And
we'll
whatever's
put-
left here, you can use for whatever office you might wanna have.
Yeah, yeah, we'll explore this.
Well, I think that would be something that should be, maybe, I would like to see, drawing similar to this.
Yeah, and each one would, we have to refine it, is to get the intention of 3 is to get it onto that site without closing it.
Right, that's what I'm interested. I don't wanna close any streets.
I'm not saying if it were all possible.
So out of all these options, you're just reducing the one.
We don't have to get into
Well,
arguments.
I mean,
One would increase staffing. And then find more money
oh,
for ongoing operating expenses.
that's right. I'm not.
Well, I think we should kind of match this
So
one.
that only leaves 3 then.
I know.
Do your best.
Still thinking the Skyway and take option 1 and put it over here. Save all the demolition, any tearing out, anything over here. And it'll fit in that space. I'm just using my pen as a measuring tape.
We did that,
Yeah,
pulling it down.
yeah. And take this building and move it out either to the street or to the sidewalk, regardless of what we could do. And then move the building as far north as you can with the sidewalk or without the sidewalk. It's really gonna limit that span across there. And it'd make everything a whole lot simpler, I would think, for construction and everything else, and parking.
You should use the chiller, right?
That would have to be relocated.
Yeah, that was a dumb place for it, anyhow. You never put a chiller on the south side of a building. You don't put air conditioners on the south side of your house, and they do it all the time. I used to build, so it drives me crazy.
I heard you throw the 14th date out, morning of the 14th would work for me if it works for all of you.
Did you throw this by the city at all? The Skyway company?
We did not show any drawings to the city, we just talked about the process of a request for possible vacation of the street. We did show utility work to the city, in regards to proposed utility rerouting, but, none of these options did we show to them, because obviously we wanted them to be in front of you, prior to being in front of the city.
I'm just wondering what their reaction would be to a Skyway.
So the Skyway was actually brought up when I met with them, as to why can't you do a Skyway?
They said that?
Yeah. So it was definitely brought up. I mean, it's something that if you want us to price that option, we can.
I think that would be, you know, a definite, like Phil said, if we extend this out to the sidewalk, which would reduce the
And
length
that
of
would
the sidewalk.
cover a lot of your parking, I would think, Sally Port, there'd be a whole other space at least there for.
Move the HVACs.
You, that would be separating it from booking, pre-booking, et cetera.
Yeah, the Sally Port has to go on the south end of the south.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm just throwing things out, it's my job.
no, cause the pod is up on the north side, right? Yeah.
We're trying to get the pod closer to the.
Okay.
west.
HHS is on the 14th.
Well, do we need the 14th if we have kind of a direction? What other questions do you want? Like, so your guys are, I'm hearing from you, you don't really like the vacating the 4th,
No,
right?
I don't.
Okay, so that really just leaves options 3, and then if we look at the south option with the Skyway, are those the 2 paths we wanna go down?
I guess that's me,
I'm not a fan of
That would
three,
be-
but if you compromise with one, I'll accept it.
I would be more comfortable with one of those two options as opposed to, you know, infringing into a street.
I think there'd be reluctance on the part of other members to close down the street, not just speaking for myself.
Not only that, but I mean, you have houses there, I mean, how are these people gonna respond to having inmates, you know, looking in their windows?
Well, that won't happen. That won't happen, because obviously they won't be able to see out the building.
I know, but I mean, yeah, no. I don't like that idea of going on the street, so, I don't like that, I think we can come up with something better without going on the street. Maybe not better necessarily, but something at least good.
What I'm hearing is you'd like to see option 3 with some potential tweaks. And the south option with a connecting skywalk rather than the south option connecting right to the building.
Yeah, with a connecting skywalk without interrupting minor avenue.
You ain't going above it,
Yes.
Yeah.
because you have to be, I imagine, a certain minimum distance above it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you still want a greenfield, right?
You mean from off-site or new site?
Yep.
Well,
Would that be considerably a lot more?
Oh, yeah.
It would.
Double it.
you mean
You're gonna have to get a
you'd
justice
have to
center,
file
too.
that in court, whatever.
Well, the thing about a greenfield site is that you're gonna have additional capital costs as infrastructure and all that, but
Yeah.
operationally is where you're really gonna pay for it. Now, again, the master plan side of it is if you eventually feel that the justice center should be separate and apart from this campus, that's the first step, so maybe that's what, hate to say the penalty you pay, but maybe that's the cost of getting it done, cause you gotta take step 1. So I don't wanna say don't do it, but I can tell you it's gonna be more expensive on the upfront costs as well as operational, so.
Well, you know, if you look at the Skyway, locating housing unit over here, you know, we've still got room here for expansion if you want, or parking, whatever. Cause there's gonna be parking right directly across the street. This is where the old church was demolished, and that's a vacant lot now that the county owns. So I mean, that's gonna be county parking. So I mean, it does have some room for, leave yourself some room for future expansion or whatever. It's still maintaining most of this current site. You know, you say it costs money to build that skyway and have it secure, but what is the cost per linear foot of that skyway, making it secure as part of the jail compared to demolition and rebuilding all that other stuff?
I'll have
It might be small,
I'll have that number for you.
okay, I think that's the kind of information we're looking for.
I think the option 3 component that we're gonna need some direction on that one, but I'll answer it. Is where are we gonna put those people in the period of 2 years while we're constructing it? So
What people?
all those individuals that are in that portion of the building that we're talking about taking down.
Well, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. Cause I think we have some potential alternatives for that.
Okay, so we might need the cart in front of the horse, cause we have to have a game plan of where they're gonna go, because that's the first thing we would do.
Well, let's go in works.
Okay.
Okay?
Alright, so you're telling me that you're working on the cart, is that what you're telling me?
Right, we're still building the cart.
We have a possible option.
We don't wanna hook a horse up to it yet.
Yeah.
We have a possible option for that, so.
Alright, so what I'm hearing is, we're gonna come back with, prices for the south option with the skywalk, and option 3 with some, modified tweaks that we've talked here about potential connections, and here, yes or a no on a greenfield. Do you wanna know the number?
Maybe just for S and G, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe just the giggles.
Yeah, that too.
I'm sure that can be obtained from numerous ones that have done that now and just reduce it in size.
No, I appreciate the fact that you came back with these.
Yeah,
It's
helpful.
very helpful, yeah.
And so from a targeted timeframe of when we would have those numbers, October 4th, with what I would shoot for.
So, October fourth?
It'll probably be sent out.
Yeah,
something like that.
so if Ashley can just, and I did that on each page. She can copy that.
Yeah,
No,
Would
it's
that be
sent out.
adequate?
I don't think so.
Okay, then you can give that to her, she can copy
So what is it?
What do you think about something like this? Color coding, all this is
Yeah,
on one. but-
yeah, and then have a thing.
Yeah, we'll have a legend on it.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that-
we know what color that
You know what the thing is.
Yep.
Yeah, that.
I get it.
That's what I heard. So I'm giving you grief about it.
So,
We can't give you
so we're
grief.
gonna have October 4th.
Let's have October 4th.
11,
Yeah, 11 for them and 10.
does that work?
Yep.
Does that work for everybody else? Yeah, Tony, does that work for you?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
11 again?
Yeah. All right. So, you have an understanding now what you would like me to come back with. And we really did, I mean, you didn't really, you kind of touched on it, but was there anything else that you wanna share about that city council meeting?
Sure, I guess from the overall, presentation to them was, it's the process to get a possible vacation. There was quite a bit of discussion about other options, whether Justice Center, different location could be considered, skywalk would be considered, size, impact, if you close down one street or the other for emergency response vehicles. I'm going off of memory, so, Kyle was there as well. And, I would say that out of all the council members, there were a few vocal members, others didn't say a whole lot. So we didn't get a definitive direction on what they would decide on. But obviously there is concern about shutting down a main street, kind of like what you guys are. And I know we've done this multiple times where we come to a county, and what's happened is counties' needs and, the programs that are in the counties and building needs have grown from what they were historically. So most counties will be on one city block, and then they have parking surrounding that. A lot of times as it's grown, it makes sense to be able to expand into the next city block. And it's what you have half a city block you own, right? It just happens to be Main Street, right? So that's the challenge of being able to take the data and say what makes the most sense for long-range planning. And I know how difficult it is to consider closing a street, but a lot of times it comes back to dollars and cents. First costs as well as operational costs. And that's that's where we're gonna be heading, we'll start looking at first costs, and we'll have some operational numbers to compare as well.
The one thing I like about it across the street, it's gonna leave this all, so 30, 40, 50 years down the road, there's room here to do stuff, you know.
We could demo the whole site and build over again. That's all we're gonna need.
Do you want me to put that down in the master plan, so they know 30 years to take it down?
I'm not gonna worry about it. I mean, there's also, here in extra land.
Yep.
I mean, we could probably, I'm sure money talks, so I mean, there's a possibility here, the rest of that half a block. I mean, there's room there for potential down the road.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Anyone else have anything? Is there any announcements?
Remember on September 13th, we are going to Barron County to tour their jail. The tour starts at 11 a.m.
We leave here at 11.
No, we'll leave
No,
here
no,
at like
yeah,
10.
Live here
Oh,
about 10, 11.
Okay, well, we got her.
So leave here at 10 o'clock.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And,
And
yeah,
we'll try to, for those who want to do carpooling, we'll try to arrange that too.
Yeah.
Jeff can take a couple people. I can take a couple people. I think Wedwick was
I have
the
a.
I can take 5.
I can take 5.
Tony, how much does your van hold?
Okay.
oh, six.
Oh, okay. Alright.
That's what all
All right,
six
so,
are.
yeah.
Just one of them storm goes.
Thanks, Ashley, for reminding. Alright, so then our next meeting date will be October 4th at 11 a.m.
Yep.
Wednesday. And with that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I'll say.
Motion been made and second to adjourn. Any opposition? All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
Nobody will have a county board meeting on the 4th, committee meeting, so.
This is good.
You can keep that, Marty, and then give me your
Oh,
notes.
no, I just assume you take it back as, you know, I don't wanna get out in the public, you know, nothing's really finalized, but it's a good review. House review, so I think you should,
Oh, yeah.
if you wanna give it out to the public.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for making it in, sorry we woke you
Yeah,
up.
ahead of time,
Oh.
you know.
Well, you know what I'm gonna do? Go back home alone.
There you go.
Because Connie told Ashley that we asked for it.
Absolutely.
So she's kind of
You
like,
deserve it,
"What?"
you're in it.
I don't think they're going to.
Nobody wanted to get your attention.
Tom, good seeing you.
I sit back and I'll say, I don't take credit.
What did you do for 50 years?
Oh.
All kinds of things?